The sound of the slap cut through the marble hall before anyone could stop it. Hazel Brooks froze, one hand rising to her cheek, her ears ringing. The woman in front of her had struck her hard enough to leave a red mark that would still be there in the morning. For a moment neither of them moved. The music from the main ballroom drifted down the corridor, warm and golden, as if nothing had happened at all. Vanessa Lloyd lowered her hand slowly, as though she had all the time in the world. She smoothed the front of her silver gown and looked at Hazel the way a person looks at a stain on a carpet. "You forget your place," Vanessa said. Her voice was calm, almost pleasant. "You are paid to move your hands and say the words, that is all. You are not paid to make my future husband's sister laugh at me." Hazel kept her chin level, though her heart was pounding. She had learned long ago that the worst thing she could do in front of a person like this was cry. "I only signed what your guests were saying," she answered. "Nora asked me to. That is my job." "Your job?" Vanessa's mouth curved into something that was not a smile. "Look at you. Do you honestly think anyone in this house sees you as more than furniture, something to fill a corner?" The words were meant to sting, and they did. Hazel had heard versions of them her whole life, from schoolyards and waiting rooms and every place where people decided her worth by looking at her body first. But she had also learned that cruelty said more about the speaker than the target. She let the silence answer for her, and that silence seemed to make Vanessa angrier than any reply could have. What neither woman saw was the man standing at the far end of the corridor. Adrian Cole had stepped out of the ballroom for air. The engagement party had been loud and full of people who wanted things from him, and he had needed 1 minute of quiet before returning to the performance of it all. He had turned the corner just in time to see his fiancée raise her hand and bring it down across the face of the one person in his household he trusted without question. He did not shout. Adrian rarely raised his voice. In his world, the loudest man in the room was usually the one about to lose everything. Instead, he went very still, the kind of stillness that made experienced men leave a room quietly. His dark eyes moved from Vanessa's hand to the red mark blooming on Hazel's cheek, to Hazel herself, who had not once stepped back or begged. She simply stood there, wounded and unbowed. Adrian took a single step forward, and that was when he saw the movement above him. On the balcony that overlooked the corridor, half hidden behind a column, stood his younger sister. Nora Cole was 22 years old, and she had been deaf since a fever took her hearing at the age of 4. She was the softest thing in Adrian's hard life, the one part of the world he had sworn to keep clean. She had seen the whole thing. Her hands were already moving, fast and sharp, catching the light. Adrian's attention snapped to her the way it snapped to nothing else. He climbed the first few stairs so she could see him clearly, and he watched her hands. Nora signed quickly, her face tight with an anger he had rarely seen on her. He read every word. "This is not the first time," she told him. "She hurts Hazel when you are away. She thinks I do not notice because I cannot hear, but I see everything, brother. I see more than any of them." Adrian's expression did not change, and that was the most dangerous thing about it. Down in the corridor, Vanessa had finally noticed him. Her whole body shifted, the anger draining from her face and being replaced by something smooth and warm and completely false. "Adrian," she said, turning toward him with open arms, "there you are. I was just speaking with your interpreter about the seating for tomorrow." He came down the stairs without hurrying. He passed Vanessa as though she were made of glass, and he stopped in front of Hazel instead. Up close he could see the mark clearly, the shape of fingers already darkening on her skin. He could see that her eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. "Are you hurt?" he asked her quietly. Hazel blinked. In the 2 years she had worked in this house, Adrian Cole had spoken perhaps 100 sentences to her, all of them about Nora, all of them about the work. She had never once expected concern. "I am fine," she said, because that was what she always said. "You are not," he answered, "but you are safe. Go and sit with Nora." I will send someone with ice." Vanessa laughed, a light and disbelieving sound. "You cannot be serious. Over this? Adrian, she is staff. She spoke out of turn to your sister and made me look foolish in front of the Harrington family. I put her in her place, nothing more." Adrian turned to look at his fiancée then, and for the first time that evening, she seemed to understand that something had gone wrong. He studied her the way he studied a contract that had a clause he had missed. "You struck a woman in my house," he said, "in front of my sister because you were embarrassed. I disciplined an employee. She does not work for you." His voice never rose. "She works for Nora, and Nora, it seems, has watched you do this before." The color left Vanessa's face. She glanced up at the balcony where Nora still stood, arms folded, watching them both with an expression that made her look far older than her years. "She is deaf," Vanessa said, and the words came out before she could stop them. "She cannot have told you anything. She does not even." "Choose your next words carefully." Adrian's voice dropped so low that Hazel felt it more than heard it. "Because whatever you say about my sister will be the last thing I remember about you." The corridor went silent. Even the distant music seemed to hold its breath. Vanessa looked at the three of them, the boss, the interpreter, and the sister on the balcony, and for the first time she seemed to grasp that she had struck something far more important than a servant. She had struck a crack straight through the foundation of everything she had come here to build. "You are choosing her over me," Vanessa said at last. "Over an arrangement your own father wanted. You would throw away the alliance for a woman who cannot even see her own feet." Hazel flinched, but she did not look away. Adrian stepped closer to Vanessa. "My father is gone," he said, "and I bury what does not serve me." He let those words settle. "Go back to the party, smile, tell the Harringtons whatever you like. We will speak in the morning when I have decided what you are worth to me now." Vanessa's jaw tightened. She was not a woman used to being dismissed, and Hazel could see her deciding whether to fight. But there was something in Adrian's stillness that stopped her. She had heard the stories about him, the same stories everyone whispered. She smoothed her gown again, lifted her chin, and walked back toward the ballroom without another word. Her heels clicked against the marble like a countdown. When she was gone, Adrian exhaled slowly. He looked back at Hazel and some of the ice left his face. "I did not know," he said. "You never said anything." "It was not my place," Hazel answered. "You keep using that phrase." He tilted his head. "Your place. Who taught you to think you have such a small one?" She had no answer for that. Before she could find one, Nora came hurrying down the stairs, her face full of worry, and threw her arms around Hazel. Then she pulled back and began to sign rapidly, her hands flying. "Are you hurt? Did she hit you again?" I finally told him. I could not watch it anymore." Hazel signed back, her own hands shaking a little. "I am all right, thank you. You are braver than me." Adrian watched them speak in the language he had spent years learning for his sister's sake. The two of them wrapped in a conversation he was only half a part of, and he felt something shift in his chest that he did not have a name for. He had built his life on knowing exactly what everyone around him wanted, and exactly what they were worth to him. Vanessa had wanted his name and his protection. His associates wanted his money and his fear. His enemies wanted his territory. He looked at Hazel Brooks, who had asked for nothing, who had stood in a corridor and taken a blow rather than repeat something unkind about the guests, who had spent 2 years being the voice of his sister without ever asking to be seen herself. He did not know what she wanted, and that, in his world, made her the most interesting person in the building. "Come," he said, "both of you, away from all of this." He led them not back to the party but to a small sitting room at the quiet end of the house, a room with soft chairs and a window that looked out over the dark garden. He sent a man for ice and for tea, and he stood by the window while Nora fussed over Hazel's cheek, and Hazel insisted, again and again, that she was fine. "She will not stop saying it," Adrian said, half to himself. "That she is fine, even now." Nora caught the movement of his lips and signed to him. Because no one has ever made it safe for her not to be. She has worked here 2 years, brother. Do you know anything about her? Anything at all? Adrian was quiet. He realized with something close to shame that he did not. He knew Hazel Brooks arrived at 7, that she was patient, that she had a laugh that made Nora smile, that she never gossiped and never asked for favors. He knew she was the best interpreter the agency had ever sent. He did not know where she lived, or whether she had family, or what she wanted from the world. "Tell me something about yourself," he said to Hazel, and the request was so unexpected that she looked up at him in surprise. "Why?" "Because I have decided I should know." Hazel held the ice against her cheek and considered him. He was not a safe man. Everyone knew what the Cole family was, even if no one said it plainly. And yet in 2 years he had never once made her feel unsafe, had never looked at her the way so many powerful men looked at women who worked for them. He had simply been distant and busy, and utterly devoted to the one person he loved. "There is not much to tell," she said. "I learned to sign because my brother was born deaf. He passed away when I was 19. After that, signing was the only piece of him I had left, so I made it my work. That is how I ended up here." The room was quiet. Nora reached over and squeezed Hazel's free hand. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. "So you did not come to this house for the money," he said, "or for the name, or for anything I could give you." "I came because Nora needed someone," Hazel said simply, "and because she reminds me a little of him, the stubborn part, the way she refuses to let the world make her small." At that Nora grinned and signed, "I am not stubborn. I am correct and people are slow." Both women laughed. Adrian did not laugh, but something in his face eased, and for the first time all evening he looked less like a man carrying the weight of an empire and more like a brother who loved his sister. "You will not go back to the party," he said. "Neither of you stay here. I will handle the rest." "The Harringtons will expect you both," Hazel reminded him. "Vanessa's family. If you insult them tonight." "Let me worry about the Harringtons." He moved to the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. He looked back at her, and his voice was quieter than she had ever heard it. "You took that blow so you would not have to repeat something cruel about strangers. Do you understand how rare that is in my world? I am surrounded by people who would sell their own mothers for a smaller reason than pride." Hazel did not know what to say. So she said nothing, and Adrian nodded once, as if her silence had confirmed something for him, and stepped out into the hall. He walked back toward the noise and the light with his mind already working. In the space of 10 minutes, the careful arrangement that had ruled his life for the past year had come apart in his hands. The marriage to Vanessa Lloyd had never been about love. It had been about peace, a bridge between his family and the Harringtons, a way to end a rivalry that had cost both sides too much. He had agreed to it the way he agreed to most things, coldly, weighing the benefit against the cost. But he had missed something. He had looked at Vanessa and seen a solution, and he had not seen the person underneath, the one who slapped a kind woman in a corridor because she felt threatened by a moment of laughter. If she could do that when he was 30 feet away, what would she do inside his home, near his sister, when he was gone for days at a time? He thought of Nora's hands moving in the light. This is not the first time. She hurts Hazel when you are away. Adrian stopped in the middle of the empty hallway. The music was close now, and he could hear Vanessa's laughter rising above the crowd, bright and confident, a woman who believed she had smoothed everything over. She did not yet understand that she had shown him exactly who she was, and that in doing so she had made his decision for him. He stood there a moment longer, and then he did something he had not done in a very long time. He let himself feel the anger fully, the clean and simple anger of a man who had watched someone hurt a person who did not deserve it. He held it, and he let it settle into resolve. Then he straightened his jacket, fixed his expression into the calm mask the world expected, and walked into the ballroom to end the engagement that everyone in the room still believed was the future of two great families. Behind him, in the quiet room, Hazel sat with the ice against her cheek and Nora's hand in hers, and she had no idea that the entire course of her life had just changed direction in a single, ringing moment. She only knew that for the first time in 2 years, someone powerful had looked at her and asked to know her name. Nora watched her friend's face and sighed softly. "He is different tonight. I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you just now." Hazel shook her head. "You are imagining things. Men like your brother do not look at women like me." Nora's expression turned serious, almost fierce. "Stop that," she sighed. "Stop deciding what he sees before he tells you. You spend your whole life making yourself smaller so no one can hurt you first. I know because I do the same thing, but I watched him tonight, Hazel. He did not see furniture in that corridor. He saw a person worth protecting. And my brother has protected exactly 2 people in his entire life. Now there are 3. Hazel looked down at her hands, the hands that spoke for a living, and did not answer. Outside the window the garden was dark and still. Somewhere in the house a door closed, and the sound of the party changed, a ripple moving through the crowd as the host returned with news no one expected. The mark on her cheek still ached. But underneath the ache was something new and frightening and warm, a feeling she had spent years learning not to hope for. She did not know yet that Vanessa Lloyd would not go quietly. She did not know that the Harringtons would take the broken engagement as an insult worth answering, or that the danger of the coming days would touch not only Adrian, but the 2 people he had just claimed as his own. She did not know that before the week was over, she would have to decide how much courage a quiet woman could hold. She only knew this room, and this moment, and the strange new feeling of being seen. And down the hall, in a ballroom full of powerful people, Adrian Cole raised a glass, smiled the smile that fooled everyone, and prepared to burn a bridge he had spent a year building, for the sake of a woman who had never once asked him to. The evening was far from over. In many ways it had only just begun. Morning came gray and heavy over the Cole estate, and Adrian had not slept. He sat behind the wide desk in his study with a cup of coffee gone cold beside him, and a folder open in front of him that had nothing to do with business. It was a thin file, put together in the small hours by a man he trusted, and it contained everything Adrian had never bothered to learn about the woman his sister loved like family. Hazel Brooks, 29 years old. Raised in a small house on the edge of the city by a mother who cleaned offices at night. One younger brother, deaf from birth, gone 3 years now, no father in the picture. She had put herself through her training with 2 jobs and no help from anyone. She sent money home every month to her mother, who was ill. She had never once been late to work, never once asked for a raise, never once complained. Adrian closed the folder. He had spent his life learning to read people, and yet he had walked past this woman for 2 years and read nothing at all. He had seen a shape and a function. He had not seen a person carrying more weight than most of the hard men who worked for him, and carrying it without complaint. There was a knock at the door. His second, a broad and quiet man named Cormac, stepped inside. Cormac had been with the family since Adrian was a boy, and he did not waste words. "The Harringtons want an answer," Cormac said. "They know something happened last night. Vanessa left the party early. The word is already moving. If you break the engagement, they will take it as a challenge." Adrian leaned back in his chair. "Let them." Cormac did not react, but his silence had a weight to it. "The peace held because of that marriage," he said. 3 years of quiet, you know what came before it." "I know exactly what came before it." Adrian's voice was flat. "I was the one who ended it, and I am telling you now that peace was built on a lie. I looked at Vanessa Lloyd and saw a woman I could tolerate for the sake of order. I was wrong about her. And a man who marries the wrong person to keep the peace only trades one war for another, worse one, inside his own walls." Cormac studied him. This is about the interpreter. This is about my sister, Adrian said sharply, and about the kind of house I want to keep, but yes, it is also about the interpreter. The older man was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly, the way he did when he had decided something. Nora signed to me this morning, he said, before you were awake. She wanted me to understand what she saw in case you did not act on it. She has watched a great deal, that girl, more than any of us gave her credit for. Adrian looked up. Tell me. Cormac settled into the chair across the desk, and what he said next made Adrian's jaw tighten with every sentence. It had started small weeks ago. Vanessa had begun spending time at the estate to prepare for the wedding, and from the first day she had disliked Hazel. She disliked the way Nora brightened when Hazel arrived. She disliked being in a room where two people could speak a language she did not understand, could laugh at things she could not hear. Most of all, Cormac said carefully, she disliked the way Adrian's voice changed when he thanked Hazel for taking care of his sister. It was the only softness anyone ever saw in him, and Vanessa had noticed it before Adrian himself had. So she had begun to make Hazel's days harder, small cruelties at first. Changing Nora's schedule without telling Hazel, so that Hazel would arrive and be scolded for being in the wrong place. Sending her to fetch things and then complaining she had been slow, mocking her clothes, her size, the food she ate at lunch. Nora had seen it all because Nora was always watching, and because people forgot that a girl who could not hear could still read every expression, every lip, every unkind gesture. And Hazel had never said a word, not to Adrian, not to anyone. She had simply come back the next day, and the next, because a young woman she loved needed her, and because she had learned long ago that speaking up rarely helped and often made things worse. Nora tried to tell you twice, Cormac finished. You were away both times. By the time you returned, the moment had passed, and Hazel begged her to let it go. She did not want to be the reason for trouble in your house. He paused. She has more loyalty to your family than half the men who take your money. Adrian sat very still. The coffee had gone cold, the room had gone quiet, and inside him something that had been simmering all night finally hardened into certainty. He thought of Hazel standing in that corridor, taking a blow rather than repeating an unkindness. He thought of her 3 years of quiet grief, her sick mother, her endless patience with a world that had given her very little. And he thought of Vanessa, who had looked at all of that and seen only a threat to be crushed. Bring her to me, Adrian said. Vanessa. Now, before the Harringtons send anyone. I want to look at her one more time before I decide what happens next. Cormac rose, and Hazel. Hazel stays out of this. She has carried enough. Whatever comes, she does not carry it alone, not anymore. While he waited for Vanessa to arrive, Adrian walked the long gallery on the upper floor, the one that looked down over the front drive. It was where he did his hardest thinking. Portraits of men he had never met lined the walls, faces of a family history he had inherited along with all its weight, and he moved past them slowly, his footsteps the only sound in the house. He thought about his father, who had built the peace with the Harringtons in the first place, and who had believed that a marriage could hold two hard families together the way mortar held stone. His father had been a practical man. He had loved Adrian in a distant, demanding way, and he had loved Nora more openly, as though her deafness had cracked something open in him that nothing else could reach. When the fever took her hearing, it had been their father who learned to sign first, staying up night after night with a book and a candle, teaching himself so that his daughter would never grow up in silence. Adrian had learned from watching him. That was the man who had arranged the marriage. And Adrian wondered, standing in the quiet gallery, what his father would think of him now, breaking that arrangement, risking that peace, for the sake of a woman his father had never even met. He decided after a while that his father would have understood. His father had learned an entire language out of love. A man like that did not truly believe in marriages built on arithmetic alone. He had simply run out of time to teach his son the difference. Cormac found him there a few minutes later. She has arrived, the older man said. She is in the front hall. She brought no one with her, which tells me she still believes she can talk her way back into this. She cannot, Adrian said. I know that she does not. Cormac paused. Do you want me in the room? No. This is mine to finish. Cormac nodded and turned to go, then stopped. Your father would have done the same thing, he said, as though he had heard the whole conversation Adrian had been having in his own head. He married for the family, yes, but he never once mistook it for the real thing. He told me once that the only choice he ever made purely for himself was learning to sign for Nora. He said it was the only thing he ever did that he was certain was right. The old man's weathered face softened. You are about to make your own version of that choice. I thought you should know he would have been proud of it. Adrian said nothing, but something in his chest loosened. He gave Cormac a single nod, and then he went down to meet the woman he had almost married. Vanessa arrived within the hour, and she came dressed for a fight she believed she could win. She wore pale blue, her hair perfect, her smile ready. She swept into the study as though the night before had never happened, as though a slap in a corridor was the sort of thing sensible people simply forgot. You wanted to see me, she said, arranging herself in the chair across from him. Good. I think we both said things last night we did not mean. The party was a strain on everyone. Let us put it behind us and talk about the wedding. Adrian did not offer her coffee. He did not offer her anything. He simply looked at her, and after a moment her smile began to falter. There will be no wedding, he said. Vanessa laughed, a short and brittle sound. You cannot be serious over a servant. Adrian, think about what you are saying. Do you understand what my family will do if you humiliate us like this? 3 years of peace gone, because a girl who signs for your sister got a slap she probably deserved. She did not deserve it, Adrian said. No one deserves it, and that is not why the wedding is off. Then why? Vanessa's voice rose. Tell me why, because I raised my hand, because your deaf little sister ran to you with a story. You would take her word over mine. She sees a fraction of what happens and understands even less. She is. Do not. The word landed like a stone dropped into still water. You were about to say something about my sister. I gave you one chance last night to be careful with her name. You are about to waste your last. Vanessa closed her mouth. For the first time, real fear flickered across her face, and behind the fear was the dawning understanding that she had misjudged the man in front of her completely. She had thought Adrian Cole was cold, and she had thought cold men could be managed. She had not understood that his coldness was a wall, and that behind the wall was something she had spent weeks provoking without ever realizing the danger. The wedding is off, Adrian said again, slower now, because you showed me who you are. You looked at a good woman and saw a target. You looked at my sister and saw someone you could deceive because she cannot hear you. You spent weeks making cruelty a habit in my home while I was away, and you did it quietly so I would never know. That is who you are. And I do not build a life with people like that. I do not let them near the two things I protect. Vanessa was pale now, but she was not finished. She had come from a hard family too, and she knew how to fight when cornered. You think you can simply end this, she said, her voice low and vicious. You think my father will shake your hand and walk away. You are trading a marriage for a fat little interpreter who will never give you anything my family can. And when this house comes down around you, when the peace breaks and the streets fill up again, you will remember that you chose her. You will remember that you set fire to everything for a woman who is not even beautiful. Adrian rose from his chair. He did not shout. He walked around the desk slowly and stood in front of her, and when he spoke his voice was almost gentle, which was the most frightening thing of all. You keep talking about what she is not, he said. Let me tell you what she is. She is the only person who ever walked into my house and asked for nothing. She buried her brother and turned her grief into a gift for my sister. She takes a blow rather than repeat an unkind word. She is kind in a world that has never once been kind to her. He leaned down slightly. And you looked at all of that, and the only thing you could see was that she is not thin, That is not her failing, Vanessa. That is yours. And it tells me everything I needed to know about the woman I almost married. Vanessa's hands were shaking, whether with rage or fear he could not tell. My father will hear from me directly, not from you. I will handle your family my own way, and I will not hide behind a wedding to do it. He straightened. You will leave this house now. You will not return, and you will never again come within 100 feet of my sister or of Hazel Brooks. That is not a request. It is the only mercy I am offering you, and it expires the moment you leave this room. For a long moment Vanessa did not move. She looked up at him, searching his face for the crack that would let her back in, the weakness she could work on. She found nothing. Adrian Cole had made his decision in a corridor the night before, watching a woman he barely knew refuse to break, and there was no undoing it. She stood. She gathered whatever dignity she had left, which was not much, and she walked to the door. But at the threshold she turned back, and the mask was gone entirely now, and what was underneath was ugly. You will regret this, she said quietly. You and your sister and your interpreter. My family does not forget an insult. When the time comes, and it will come, you remember that I warned you. You remember that you chose them over peace. Then she was gone, her heels striking the floor exactly as they had the night before, a sound Adrian would come to associate with the beginning of everything that followed. He stood alone in the study for a long time after she left. He understood the weight of what he had just done. He had not simply ended an engagement. He had broken a truce that had kept blood off the streets for 3 years, and he had done it knowing the cost. The Harringtons would not accept it quietly. There would be pressure and threats, and eventually something worse. He had made a powerful family into an enemy for the sake of a quiet interpreter and a deaf sister, and a principle he could barely put into words. And yet, standing there in the gray morning light, Adrian Cole felt something he had not felt in years. He felt clean. For the first time in a long time, he had made a choice that was not about power or peace or the endless cold arithmetic of survival. He had made a choice because it was right. There was a soft knock, and Nora appeared in the doorway. She had clearly been waiting nearby, and one look at his face told her everything. She came to him and signed, "Is it done?" "It is done," he signed back. "She is gone. She will not come back." Nora studied him carefully, the way she studied everyone, reading what his face would not say. "And there will be trouble now," she signed. "Her family." "Yes," Adrian answered, "there will be trouble." Nora was quiet for a moment. Then she signed slowly and seriously, "You did this for Hazel, not only for me. I want you to say it." Adrian looked at his sister, this young woman who saw everything, who had watched the whole thing unfold with sharper eyes than anyone. And he found that he could not lie to her, had never been able to lie to her. "I did it for both of you," he signed, "but yes, also for her." Nora smiled then, a small and knowing smile, and signed, "Good. Now go and tell her, not everything. She is not ready for everything, and neither are you. But tell her she is safe. Tell her she has a place here that no one can take away. She has spent her whole life waiting for someone to say it." Adrian nodded. Down the hall, in the room where light came through the tall windows, Hazel Brooks was waiting to begin another ordinary day, unaware that the world outside the estate had already begun to shift, unaware that a powerful family was, at that very moment, learning that the marriage meant to bind them had been broken, and that the man who broke it had done so for her. She only knew that when Adrian Cole appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, he looked at her the way he had in the corridor, as though she were a person worth crossing the world to protect. And she still had no idea why. The gate at the front of the estate stood open, and Hazel Brooks was walking through it with a bag over her shoulder and a letter in her hand, trying to leave before anyone could stop her. She had written the letter that morning at the small desk in her room, her handwriting careful and neat. She had thanked Adrian for 2 years of steady work. She had thanked him for trusting her with his sister. She had said, in words that cost her more than he would ever know, that she thought it was best for everyone if she found a position elsewhere. She did not write the real reason, which was that she had lain awake all night listening to the sounds of the house and understanding, with growing dread, that she had become the crack in something enormous. A powerful woman had been sent away because of her. A marriage had ended because of her. Whatever came next, whatever the Harringtons did, would come because a quiet interpreter had been in the wrong corridor at the wrong time. Hazel had spent her whole life making herself small enough not to matter, and now she mattered too much and it terrified her. So she had packed her bag, left the letter on the hall table and slipped out before the house was fully awake. She would find another family, another deaf child who needed a voice. She would send money to her mother. She would disappear back into the ordinary life she understood, where no one's future turned on whether she stayed or went. She had almost reached the road when a car pulled up beside her, moving slowly, and the window came down. It was not Cormac and it was not one of the guards. It was Adrian himself behind the wheel, which she had never seen. He always had a driver. He looked at her, then at the bag on her shoulder, then at the road ahead of her, and understanding settled over his face. "You were leaving," he said. "It was not a question." Hazel gripped the strap of her bag. "I left a letter. I explained everything. I did not want to make it harder by saying goodbye in person." Adrian stopped the car and stepped out. He came around to stand in front of her, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The morning was cool, and a light wind moved the trees along the drive. "Explain it to me now," he said, "in person, since I am here." She looked down at her feet. "You ended your engagement because of what happened in that corridor. I heard the house talking. Vanessa's family will not let that go quietly. And all of it, everything that is coming, traces back to me being somewhere I should not have been, laughing with Nora when Vanessa walked in." Her voice caught. "I will not be the reason your world comes apart. I have caused enough trouble simply by existing near it. It is better if I go. You will find someone else for Nora, someone who does not bring a war to your door." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Is that what you think happened, that you caused this?" "Did I not?" "No," he said it plainly. "You want to know what caused this? A woman I agreed to marry for the wrong reasons showed me who she truly was. That is what caused this. You did not make her cruel. You did not make her raise her hand. You did not make me see, finally, that I had almost tied my life and my sister's safety to someone with no kindness in her at all. You only stood in a corridor and refused to break. Everything after that was my choice. Mine, not yours." Hazel shook her head. "You do not understand. People like me are supposed to stay in the background. We are supposed to be useful and quiet and forgettable. The moment we become important, we become a problem. I have watched it happen my whole life. I will not watch it happen to you and Nora." Adrian took a step closer. "Look at me," he said, and something in his voice made her lift her eyes. "I have spent my entire life around people who are important and dangerous and cruel. I know exactly what a problem looks like. You are not a problem, Hazel. You are the opposite. You are the first thing in years that has felt like it was worth protecting for its own sake, and not because of what it could do for me." The words hung between them, and Hazel did not know what to do with them. No one had ever said anything like that to her. She had spent so long armored against unkindness that she had no defense at all against this, against a powerful man standing on a driveway telling her she was worth protecting. "You barely know me," she managed. "I know that you buried your brother and turned your grief into a gift for a girl who was not even yours to love. I know that you send money to your mother every month and never mention it. I know that you took a blow rather than repeat an unkind word about strangers. I know that you are standing on my driveway trying to sacrifice yourself to protect me from a danger you did not cause." He paused. "I have known men for 20 years. I do not trust half as much as I have come to trust you in a single night. So do not tell me I barely know you. I know the things that matter." Hazel's eyes stung. She looked away toward the road, toward the ordinary life that had felt so safe an hour ago and now felt unbearably empty. "If I stay," she said quietly, "and something happens to Nora because of me, I will never forgive myself." "If you go," Adrian answered, "something will happen to Nora because of it. Do you know what she did this morning when she found your letter?" Hazel looked back at him, alarmed. She could not read it because she cannot bear to. Cormac read it to her, and she has not spoken to anyone since. She simply sat by the window, watching the gate, waiting to see if you would really do it, waiting to see if the one person who never treated her as fragile would leave her too. Hazel closed her eyes. The image was unbearable. She had told herself she was protecting Nora by leaving, and she had never once thought about what leaving would do to the girl who had already lost so much and been underestimated by so many. "That is not fair," she whispered. "No," Adrian agreed. "It is not fair, but it is true. You have made yourself so small for so long that you cannot see the space you actually take up in the lives of the people who love you. Nora loves you. My whole household is different because you are in it." And he stopped. He was not a man who said such things easily, and the words came slowly. "I do not want to run a house you are not in. I did not understand that until I watched you walk toward that gate." The wind moved through the trees again. Somewhere a bird called out across the grounds. Hazel Brooks stood on the driveway of the most dangerous man she had ever met, holding a bag full of everything she owned, and she felt the careful walls she had built her whole life beginning to crack. "I am not brave, Adrian," she said. "Not the way you need people to be. When the trouble comes, I will be frightened. I will not know what to do." "Good," he said. "The people who are never frightened are the ones who get everyone killed. I do not need you to be a soldier. I have soldiers. I need you to be exactly what you are for Nora and for me. The rest is my job. Protecting this house is my job. Let me do it. Stop trying to protect me from the very choice I made freely and gladly." For a long moment Hazel did not move. Then slowly, she let the bag slide off her shoulder. It dropped to the gravel with a soft sound, and something in her chest loosened at the same time. Some long-held tension she had carried so long she had forgotten it was there. "Nora is really by the window?" she asked. "She has not moved in an hour." Hazel let out a breath that was half a laugh and half a sob. "Then take me back. Before she convinces herself I meant it." Something eased in Adrian's face, a relief so plain it surprised them both. He picked up her bag before she could reach for it, and he carried it to the car himself, and he opened the door for her, and Hazel Brooks got in beside the most feared man in the city as though it were the most natural thing in the world. They drove back up the long drive in silence, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of two people who had said difficult things and survived them. As the house came into view, Hazel could see a small figure at an upper window, and even from a distance she could tell that Nora had spotted the car, because the figure suddenly vanished from the glass. By the time the car reached the front steps, Nora was already there, running down them with her hair loose and her face bright with a relief so total it made Hazel's throat ache. She threw her arms around Hazel the moment the door opened, holding on so tightly that Hazel nearly lost her balance, and then she pulled back and signed with furious, joyful hands. "Do not ever do that again," Nora signed. "Do not ever leave me a letter. If you want to leave, you look at my face and you say it to me, but you are not allowed to leave. I decided. You are family now. Family does not get to run away." Hazel laughed through her tears and signed back, "I am sorry. I thought I was protecting you." "You protect me by staying," Nora signed fiercely, "not by disappearing. Everyone disappears. My hearing disappeared. Our parents disappeared. You do not get to be one more thing that disappears. Do you understand me?" "I understand," Hazel signed. "I am staying, I promise." Adrian stood a little apart, watching the two of them, and he did not interrupt. He understood that this moment belonged to them. But when Hazel finally looked up at him over Nora's shoulder, he held her gaze for a long moment, and something passed between them that neither of them was ready to name. That afternoon, while Adrian handled the endless quiet work of running a household under threat, Hazel and Nora stayed in the garden, and for the first time in days, Hazel felt the fear loosen its grip on her. The sun was warm, and the flowers along the wall were beginning to open, and Nora had insisted on teaching Hazel a new set of signs, one she had invented herself for things that had no proper sign, private jokes between the two of them that no one else in the world would understand. This one Nora signed, twisting her fingers into a shape that looked like nothing at all, means my brother when he is pretending not to be worried but is worried. Hazel laughed and copied it, and this one, she asked, making up a shape of her own. Nora studied it and grinned. That one means Cormac when he thinks no one is looking and he smiles at the birds. Hazel had never told anyone this, but the hours she spent with Nora were the happiest she had known since her brother died. There was something about the girl that reminded her so powerfully of him, not in appearance but in spirit, the same refusal to be pitied, the same fierce humor, the same way of looking at a world that had decided in advance what she could and could not be, and quietly proving it wrong every single day. You are thinking about him, Nora signed. Your brother, I can always tell. Your hands slowed down. Hazel nodded. You remind me of him, she signed. He would have liked you very much. He would have said you were far too clever and it would only cause trouble. Nora smiled, pleased. Tell me about him, she signed. You never do. You carry him around like a stone in your pocket. It is too heavy to carry alone. So Hazel told her. She sat on the low wall in the afternoon sun and signed the story of her brother, the small, brave boy who had never once let his silence make him small, who had taught her that a voice was not the same as a sound, who had died too young and left her with a language and a hole in her heart the exact shape of him. She had never told the whole story to anyone. And Nora listened with her whole body, the way only Nora could, and when Hazel finished, the girl took her hands and held them still for a long moment, which was the deaf equivalent of a long and comfortable silence. Now he lives in your hands, Nora signed at last. Every time you sign for me, he is there. I did not know that before. I will remember it now every time. Hazel could not answer. She simply pulled the girl into an embrace and held her, there in the warm garden, and understood with sudden clarity that leaving this place would have broken something in her that might never have healed. She had almost walked out that gate. She was so glad, so deeply glad, that she had not. Later, when the house had settled and Nora had reluctantly let Hazel out of her sight, Cormac found Adrian in the study. The older man's expression was grave. The Harringtons have made contact, he said. Vanessa's father, he wants a meeting, neutral ground 3 days from now. He is calling it a chance to settle the matter peacefully. Cormac paused. But we both know what these meetings are. He is not coming to talk, he is coming to measure you. To decide whether the insult can be repaid quietly, or whether it needs to be repaid another way. Adrian looked out the window, to where Hazel and Nora were sitting together in the garden below, their hands moving in the private language they shared, Nora laughing at something, Hazel smiling in a way Adrian had never seen before she stopped hiding. Then we go to the meeting, Adrian said, and we make it very clear what happens to anyone who reaches for what is mine. And if talking is not enough. Adrian was quiet for a moment, watching the two women in the garden, the sister he had protected all his life, and the woman who had almost walked out of it that morning. He thought about how close he had come to letting her go, and how the thought of it now felt like a wound. Then it is not enough, he said simply. But she stays, they both stay, and anyone who tries to change that will learn exactly why the peace lasted 3 years in the first place. Cormac studied him for a long moment. He had watched this man grow from a hard, closed boy into an even harder man, had watched him build walls around himself brick by careful brick, until there was almost nothing left that anyone could reach. And now, in the space of a few days, He had watched those walls come down for the sake of a quiet interpreter who had never asked for anything. Cormac had lived long enough to know how rare that was, and how dangerous and how precious. "I have served this family since before you could walk," the old man said quietly. "I served your father, and I will serve you until I am too old to be of use, and I will tell you the truth because someone should. That woman in the garden has done something no one else ever managed. She has given you a reason to protect something instead of only a thing to protect it from. Do not lose that, whatever it costs. Reasons are harder to find than enemies." Adrian looked at the older man, surprised. Cormac was not a man who spoke this way. "You like her," Adrian said. "I like what she has done to this house," Cormac answered. "It was a fortress before. Now it is starting to feel like a home. There is a difference. Your father knew it. I think you are only now learning it." He moved toward the door. "I will prepare for the meeting. But you should know that if it comes to more than talk, every man who works for you will stand for those two women as though they were his own. That is not because I ordered it. It is because they earned it without ever trying to." He paused at the threshold. "That is worth more than any alliance the Harringtons could have offered. I hope you see that clearly now." Then he was gone, and Adrian stood alone at the window a while longer, watching the two women in the garden, and knowing, with a certainty that frightened and steadied him at once, that Cormac was right. Down in the garden, unaware of the meeting being planned, unaware of the storm gathering just beyond the walls, Hazel Brooks tipped her face up to the afternoon sun, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, let herself simply be happy. She did not know that happiness was about to be tested. She did not know that in 3 days' time, everything she had just chosen to fight for would be placed in real danger, and that the quiet interpreter who thought she was not brave would discover exactly how much courage she had been carrying all along. The men came before the meeting, and they came for the wrong reason at the wrong time, and that mistake would change everything. Adrian had left the estate at dawn to prepare for the sit-down with Vanessa's father, taking Cormac and most of his men with him to the neutral ground across the city. It was a calculated risk. The meeting was meant to be peaceful, and a man who brought an army to a peaceful meeting was a man who did not believe in peace. So Adrian had left the estate lightly guarded, trusting the walls and the understanding, unspoken but ancient, that a family's home was not to be touched. The Harringtons did not honor that understanding. That was the whole point. Hazel was in the sunroom with Nora when it happened, working through a book together, Nora reading and Hazel signing the harder words, when the light in the room changed. It was a small thing at first, the sound of a car on the gravel where no car was expected, then another. Hazel looked up. Through the tall windows she saw men getting out of 2 dark vehicles near the side of the house, men she did not recognize, moving with a purpose that made her stomach turn to ice. She did not think. She grabbed Nora's hand and signed one word fast and sharp: "Come." Nora's eyes went wide, but she did not argue. She had spent her life reading danger in the faces of people who could not hear their own fear, and she read it now in Hazel's face. Together, they slipped out of the sunroom and into the corridor, and Hazel pulled Nora toward the back of the house, toward the old servants' stairs that most people had forgotten existed. Behind them, she heard the front door give way. She heard voices, hard and low. She heard someone call out a name, not hers but Adrian's, and understood in a flash of cold clarity that these men had come expecting to find him home, had come to send a message written in the one language every family understood. And they had found instead the two people Adrian loved most, alone and nearly unguarded. The 2 remaining guards moved to meet the intruders, and Hazel heard the scuffle break out behind her, chaos and shouting filling the grand hall. She did not look back. She pulled Nora up the narrow stairs, her heart slamming against her ribs, her mind racing. She was not brave. She had told Adrian she was not brave. And yet her body was moving anyway, doing what needed to be done, because the girl beside her was frightened and could not hear the danger coming and needed someone to be her ears. They reached the top of the stairs and Hazel pulled Nora into a small storage room, an old linen closet lined with shelves, and she closed the door as quietly as she could and pressed her back against it. Nora was shaking. Hazel took her face in both hands and made her look, made her focus, and signed slowly and clearly. "Listen to me. I need you to be calm. We are going to be all right. Your brother is coming, but right now it is you and me and I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Nora nodded, tears standing in her eyes. "Who are they?" she signed with trembling hands. "Bad men," Hazel signed. "They came for Adrian. He is not here. So we hide and we wait and we stay quiet. Not a sound. Do you understand?" Nora nodded again. And then, because she was Nora, because she was braver than she looked and sharper than anyone gave her credit for, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Her hands flew across the screen. Hazel watched her send a message, a single line to her brother. "They are here. Hazel is with me. We are hiding upstairs. Come home." Hazel had not even thought of the phone. Nora had. In the middle of her terror, the deaf girl everyone underestimated had done the one thing that mattered most, and Hazel felt a fierce, protective pride cut through her fear. They waited in the dark. Below them, the sounds of the struggle faded, and a worse silence took its place, the silence of men searching a house room by room. Hazel could hear footsteps on the stairs now, heavy and deliberate. She pressed Nora into the corner behind a shelf and stood in front of her, and she looked around the small room for anything, anything at all, that could be used to protect them. Hazel's mind raced through everything she knew about the house, every hallway and hidden corner she had learned in 2 years of walking these floors. The linen closet had one door. There was no second way out. If the men searched the upper floor thoroughly, they would find it eventually. She needed to keep Nora quiet, and she needed to be ready, and she needed, above all, not to let her own terror show, because Nora was watching her face for every clue about how frightened she should be. So Hazel did the hardest thing she had ever done. She made her face calm. She breathed slowly in and out, and she held Nora's gaze, and she signed small and steady so that anyone looking would see nothing but 2 people quietly waiting. "It is going to be all right," she signed, though she did not know if it was true. "We are going to be all right. Your brother is coming. We only have to wait." Nora nodded and copied her breathing, and Hazel felt a rush of love so fierce it steadied her more than any weapon could have. The 2 of them stood in the dark together, breathing in time, and the terror was still there, but it no longer ruled them. Then a shelf on the far wall creaked in the draft, a small sound, but in the silence it was enormous. Both women froze. Somewhere down the corridor the footsteps stopped. Hazel's heart climbed into her throat. She reached out slowly and steadied the shelf with one hand, holding it still, holding her breath, holding everything. The footsteps came closer. A voice called out, casual and cruel, telling whoever might be hiding that it would be easier to come out now. Hazel's whole body was shaking. But she planted her feet, and she stayed in front of Nora, and she made a decision that surprised her even as she made it. If the door opened, she would not scream and she would not beg. She would put herself between the danger and the girl, and she would buy Nora whatever seconds she could. The door handle turned. Hazel grabbed the only thing within reach, a heavy glass vase from the shelf, and raised it. The door swung open, and a man filled the frame, large and hard-faced, and for one frozen instant they stared at each other. Then his eyes moved past Hazel to Nora in the corner, and his mouth curved into something ugly, and he stepped forward. Hazel did not let him finish the step. She swung the vase with everything she had, all her fear and her fury and her love for the girl behind her, and it struck the man across the side of the head and shattered. He staggered, more surprised than hurt, and swore and reached for her. Hazel shoved Nora sideways, away from him, and put her own body in his path. "Run," she said aloud, forgetting Nora could not hear, but Nora understood the shape of the word and the shove, and she scrambled toward the door. The man caught Hazel's arm hard enough to bruise, and she twisted and fought, doing everything she could to keep his attention on her and away from the fleeing girl. She was not a fighter. She had never struck anyone in her life before this day. But she had spent her whole life being underestimated, and there was a strength in that, a refusal to break that had carried her through more than anyone knew. And then from below came a sound that changed everything. The front door again, but this time it was not intruders. It was Adrian's voice, raised for the first time Hazel had ever heard it, cutting through the house like a blade. Nora's message had reached him. He had turned the car around before the meeting even began, had come at a speed that should have killed him, had understood the moment he read her words that the sit-down was a distraction and the real move was here, at his home, against the two people he had left behind. The man holding Hazel's arm froze at the sound. It was the freeze of a man who had gambled that the boss was across the city and had just realized he had gambled wrong. In that instant of hesitation, Hazel wrenched herself free and stumbled toward the door. And there was Nora, who had not run after all, who had waited in the corridor for her, who grabbed Hazel's hand and would not let go. Foolish girl, Hazel thought, and loved her for it. They ran together down the corridor as Adrian's men flooded up the stairs behind him. What happened next happened fast, and Hazel would never remember it clearly, only pieces. Adrian appearing at the top of the stairs, his face a mask of controlled terror, his eyes finding them, both of them, alive. Cormac and the others moving past him toward the intruders. The man from the closet trying to run and finding there was nowhere to go. And Adrian crossing the corridor in 3 long strides and pulling both women behind him, one arm around each, shielding them with his own body as though he could stop the whole world from touching them. "Are you hurt?" he asked, and his voice was not calm now, not cold, but raw. "Either of you, tell me." Nora shook her head. Hazel could only manage, "No, we are all right, we are all right." Her arm throbbed where the man had gripped it, and there was blood on her hand from the shattered vase, but she was standing and Nora was standing, and that was all that mattered. The intruders were dealt with quickly and quietly by Adrian's men, removed from the house. The mess of their intrusion cleared away with the practiced efficiency of people who had done such things before. Adrian did not leave the 2 women's side through any of it. He walked them down to the study himself, sat them both down, sent for a doctor for Hazel's hand and for something warm for them both to drink, and he did not once let them out of his sight. When the doctor had gone and Nora had finally, exhausted, fallen asleep on the long couch with her head in Hazel's lap, Adrian sat down across from them and put his face in his hands. For a long moment he did not move. When he lifted his head, his eyes were bright in a way Hazel had never seen. "I left you here," he said quietly. "I thought the meeting was the danger. I walked into their trap and left you both behind, unguarded, because I believed there were rules." He shook his head slowly. "I will never make that mistake again." "You came back," Hazel said. "The moment Nora sent the message, you came back, you knew." "Nora saved you both," he said. "That message, if she had not thought to send it," he could not finish. He looked at his sleeping sister, at the young woman everyone had spent her whole life underestimating, who had kept her head in the middle of terror and done the one thing that mattered. "Everyone thinks she is fragile," he said, "because she cannot hear. She is the strongest person in this house." "She would not run," Hazel said softly, stroking Nora's hair. "I told her to run, and she waited for me instead. In the middle of all that, she waited for me." Adrian looked at Hazel then, at the blood on her hand and the bruise darkening on her arm and the fierce, unbroken look in her eyes, and something in his face came apart entirely. "You put yourself between a grown man and my sister," he said. "You, who told me on the driveway 3 days ago that you were not brave." "I was terrified," Hazel admitted. "I know that is what brave is." He leaned forward. "I have been surrounded by hard men my whole life, Hazel, men who kill without blinking and call it strength. I have never once seen courage like what you showed today. A frightened woman with no weapon and no training who stood in a doorway anyway because a girl she loves was behind her. His voice dropped. Do you understand now? Do you finally understand the space you take up in this world? You are not small. You never were. You just spent your whole life being told you were by people who were afraid of how much you actually are. Hazel did not answer. She could not. There were tears on her face, and Nora was warm and safe in her lap, and Adrian was looking at her the way she had never in her life expected anyone to look at her, and it was all too much and exactly enough at the same time. Outside, the day was ending, the light going gold and then gray over the grounds where dark cars had come only hours before. The immediate danger had passed. But Adrian knew, and Hazel was beginning to understand, that the Harringtons had shown their hand now. They had broken the oldest rule, come for a family's home, and there could be no more pretending at peace. What came next would be war, open and undeniable, and the three people in that study were at the center of it. Adrian rose and crossed to the window, looking out at the darkening grounds. They came into my home, he said, more to himself than to Hazel. They put their hands on the two people I would burn the world to protect. There is no meeting after this. No settlement. They have made certain of that. What happens now? Hazel asked. He turned to look at her, and for the first time she saw not the cold boss or the careful man, but simply someone tired and human and utterly resolved. Now I end it, he said, for good. And when it is done, and it will be done, there will be no one left who dares to reach for you or for her ever again. He paused. But that is my burden, not yours. You have carried enough today, more than anyone had a right to ask. Hazel looked down at Nora, sleeping and safe, and up at the man who had crossed a city at breakneck speed to reach them, and she realized that somewhere in the terror of the day, the last of her fear about staying had burned away. She was not the crack in his world. She was part of what held it together. She had known that for certain the moment she raised a glass vase against a man twice her size and refused to move. I am not going anywhere, she said quietly. Not now, not after this. Whatever comes, we face it together. All three of us. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once, and something in the set of his shoulders eased, as though her words had settled a question he had not known how to ask. Before the night was fully dark, Nora woke from her exhausted sleep, and the first thing she did was reach for Hazel's hand to be sure she was still there. When she found it, she let out a shaky breath and sat up, and her hands began to move, slowly at first and then faster, as everything she had held in during the terror finally came pouring out. I was so frightened, she signed, her eyes filling. Not for me, for you. When that man came into the room, I thought he would hurt you because of me, because you would not leave me, and I could not even scream for help. I could not make a single sound to bring anyone. Do you know what that is like? To watch someone you love in danger and not be able to make a sound. Hazel took the girl's face in her hands. You did better than scream, she signed. You sent the message. You brought your brother home. A scream would have brought those men to us faster. Your silence saved us, Nora. The very thing the world always treats as your weakness is the thing that saved all three of us tonight. Do you understand that? Do you understand how strong you are? Nora stared at her, and something shifted in the girl's face, some old wound beginning at last to heal. She had spent her whole life being told in 1,000 small ways that her silence made her less. And here was the person she trusted most in the world telling her that her silence had been the thing that saved them. Adrian watched the exchange, and though he did not sign anything, his eyes were bright. He reached out and rested a hand on his sister's shoulder, and she leaned into it. And for a long moment the three of them simply stayed like that, a boss and a sister and an interpreter, bound together now by something no enemy could break. The night came down over the estate, and in the study, three people who had almost lost each other stayed close in the lamplight, and none of them said aloud what they all now knew, that the family they had become was worth any war, and that the coming days would test exactly how far each of them would go to keep it whole. It ended not with noise, but with a name spoken quietly across a table, and the sound of a powerful man understanding that he had lost. Adrian moved carefully in the days after the attack on his home. He did not lash out, though every instinct told him to. He had learned long ago that rage was a tool for weak men, and that the coldest response was always the most complete. So he gathered what he needed patiently. He learned who among the Harringtons had planned the strike on his house, who had given the order to break the oldest rule and come for a family in their home. He learned that Vanessa's father had not planned it at all, that it had been Vanessa herself, acting out of wounded pride, using her family's men without her father's full knowledge, gambling that a strike at Adrian's home would either bring him to heel or destroy him. She had gambled and she had lost, and in doing so she had handed Adrian something more powerful than any weapon. She had made her own family's word worthless. She had broken the rule that protected all of them, and when the other families of the city learned of it, and Adrian made certain they learned of it, the Harringtons found themselves suddenly alone, isolated, an example of what happened to a family that could not control its own. Adrian did not need to raise a hand after that. The city did it for him. A family that broke the home rule was a danger to everyone, and everyone turned their backs at once. Within a week the Harringtons were finished as a power, not destroyed but diminished, stripped of the respect that had made them dangerous, left to manage the ruin of their own name. Vanessa's father, an old and careful man, understood exactly what had happened and exactly who had made it happen without spilling a drop of blood, and he sent word that his family wanted nothing further, that the matter was closed, that his daughter had acted alone and would answer to him for it. Adrian read the message twice and then set it aside. It was over, not with the violence he had prepared himself for, but with something colder and more final. He had won the way he preferred to win, by making his enemies destroy themselves. Before he went to find her, Adrian stood alone for a while in Nora's room. His sister was out in the garden with Hazel, and the room was quiet, full of the small, ordinary things of a young woman's life, and he stood in the middle of it and let himself feel the full weight of what had nearly happened. Men had come into this house. They had climbed these stairs. They had come within a single closed door of reaching the two people he loved most in the world, and he had not been there. He had built his whole life on control, on always being the one who saw the danger first, who moved first, who left nothing to chance. And in the end, what had saved them was not his control at all. It was a frightened woman with a glass vase and a deaf girl with a phone, the two people the world was always so quick to underestimate, doing what needed to be done while he raced across a city too late to help. The lesson of it had cut him deeply, and it had also changed something in him. He had spent his life believing that strength meant standing alone. He understood now that it had never been true. He thought about the years ahead. He was not naive. There would always be some new danger in a life like his, some new enemy, some new test. But he had also learned in the space of a few terrible weeks exactly what he was willing to risk everything for, and exactly who he wanted beside him when the risks came. That knowledge felt like the first solid ground he had stood on in years. When he was ready, he went downstairs and out through the tall doors into the evening, and he found Hazel in the garden. She was sitting on the low stone wall where she and Nora liked to work, and the last of the sunlight was warm on her face. She had a book in her lap, but she was not reading it. She was simply sitting, present and quiet, and Adrian stood for a moment at the edge of the garden and watched her before she noticed him. He had been thinking about what to say for days. He was not a man who spoke about feelings. He had spent his whole life keeping the softest parts of himself locked away where no one could use them against him. But he had also spent his whole life watching people fail to say the thing that mattered until it was too late, and he had decided he would not be one of them. "It is finished," he said, and Hazel turned. "The Harringtons, they will not trouble us again. Vanessa is gone, sent away by her own father. It is over." Relief moved across Hazel's face, but under it was something more careful. "How?" she asked. There was no, she stopped, not knowing how to say it. "No violence," Adrian said. "Not this time. She broke a rule that protected everyone, and the city turned against her family for it. Sometimes the coldest ending is the cleanest." He came and sat down on the wall beside her, close but not touching, and for a while they both looked out over the garden in silence. "I keep waiting to feel afraid again," Hazel said at last. "I felt afraid for so long, every day here waiting for the trouble to come, and now you tell me it is gone, and I do not know what to do with the quiet." "You learn to live in it," Adrian said. "It takes time, I am still learning." Hazel looked at him. "You have carried this your whole life, haven't you? The waiting, the watching, never letting anyone close enough to hurt you." "Yes. And yet you let us close, Nora and me." Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to face her fully, and there was nothing cold in his face at all now, none of the mask he wore for the world. "I need to say something to you," he said. "And I need you to let me finish before you decide to argue with it, because I know you will want to." A faint smile touched his mouth. "You have spent every day since I met you trying to make yourself smaller, trying to convince me and everyone else that you do not matter, that you are staff, that you are the crack in things, that the world would be simpler without you in it. And I have watched you do it, and I have watched it be a lie, over and over." Hazel opened her mouth, and he lifted a hand. "Let me finish. When I saw Vanessa strike you in that corridor, I did not feel what I expected to feel. I did not think, that is inconvenient, or that is a problem I must manage. I felt something I had not felt in years. I felt the need to stand between you and the world. I did not understand it then. I understand it now." He paused, and when he spoke again his voice was lower. "I did not end that engagement only because Vanessa was cruel, though she was. I ended it because I looked at her, and then I looked at you, and I understood that I had spent a year preparing to marry the wrong woman while the right one was signing to my sister in the next room and asking for nothing at all." Hazel's breath caught. "Adrian." "I am not finished." His eyes held hers. "You stood in a doorway with a glass vase and put yourself between a grown man and my sister. You, who told me you were not brave. You are the bravest person I have ever known, and the kindest, and I have known some of the hardest people alive. I do not want to run this house without you in it. I do not want to face the quiet or the noise or any of it without you beside me, not as Nora's interpreter, as something more, as the person I choose." He stopped. "I have never said anything like this to anyone. I am saying it badly, but I mean every word of it." For a long moment Hazel could not speak. The sunlight was fading, and the garden was going soft and gray around them, and the man she had spent 2 years thinking of as untouchable had just laid himself open in front of her in a way she knew, without being told, that he had never done for anyone. "You know what I am," she said finally, and her voice trembled. "You know how the world sees me. When you walk into a room with me on your arm, people will look and they will wonder why. Vanessa said it. I am not beautiful the way your world expects. I am not." "Stop." Adrian said it gently, but it was still a command. "You are going to let a cruel woman's dying insult live in your head, and I will not have it. Do you want to know what I see when I look at you? I see the only person who ever made my sister feel whole. I see courage and kindness and a heart that has been through more than most people could survive and came out soft instead of hard. I see the person I want beside me for the rest of my life. That is what I see. And I do not care in the slightest what anyone in any room thinks, because I have spent my whole life not caring what people think, and I am not about to start over the one thing that has ever truly mattered to me." Tears were running freely down Hazel's face now, but they were not sad tears. Adrian reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and he brushed one of them from her cheek with his thumb, the same cheek that had been struck in a corridor weeks ago at the start of everything. "I'm not asking you for an answer tonight," he said quietly. "I know this is a great deal. I only needed you to know the truth, that you are seen, Hazel, fully, by me. And that whatever you decide, you have a place here that no one will ever take from you again." Hazel looked at him, at this dangerous and gentle man who had crossed a city to save her, who had broken his whole careful world for a principle he could barely name, who was now sitting on a garden wall telling her she was worth choosing. And she thought about all the years she had spent making herself small, apologizing for the space she took up, waiting for someone to decide she was not worth the trouble. And she thought about how tired she was of hiding. "I do not need until tomorrow," she said. Adrian went still. "I have spent my whole life being careful," Hazel said. "Careful not to hope, careful not to want things I was told I could not have. I am tired of being careful." She reached up and put her hand over his, the one still resting against her cheek. "I choose you too. I have for a while. I was just too frightened to say it because I did not believe someone like you could ever look at someone like me and see anything worth keeping. But you do. I can see that you do, and I am done being frightened of it." Something broke open in Adrian's face, a relief and a joy so complete that it transformed him entirely, and for one moment he did not look like the most feared man in the city at all. He looked like a man who had spent his whole life expecting to be alone and had just discovered he was wrong. Neither of them noticed Nora at first. She had come out to find them, drawn by some instinct that told her the moment she had been quietly engineering for weeks had finally arrived. She stood at the edge of the garden, watching her brother and her best friend sitting close together in the fading light, their hands joined, the truth of it plain on both their faces. And she smiled, a wide and knowing smile, the smile of a young woman who saw everything and understood more than anyone gave her credit for. When they finally noticed her, both of them a little embarrassed, Nora came across the garden and sat down on the wall on Hazel's other side, so that Hazel was between the two of them, the brother and the sister, the two people she had come to love. Nora looked from one of them to the other, and then she began to sign slowly, so they would both be sure to catch every word. "I have known since the party," she signed, her hands full of quiet triumph. "I saw how he looked at you in that corridor. I told you that night, Hazel. My brother has protected two people his whole life. I said there were three now," she smiled. "I was wrong. There are not three separate people. There is one family, and I made it happen. Remember that, both of you, for the rest of your lives. It was me." Hazel laughed, the sound bright and free in the evening air, and she pulled Nora into an embrace, and Adrian wrapped an arm around them both, the two people he had crossed the world to protect, the family he had never expected and would never let go. The sun sank below the trees, and the first stars came out over the estate, and the three of them sat together on the low stone wall as the day ended. There would be more days ahead, ordinary ones and difficult ones, the slow work of building a life out of the wreckage of old arrangements. But the war was over, and the danger was gone, and the fear that had followed Hazel Brooks her whole life had finally, at long last, released its grip. She had come to this house 2 years ago as a voice for a girl who could not hear, expecting nothing, hoping for nothing, prepared as always to be useful and quiet and forgotten. She had never once imagined that she would find, in the home of the most dangerous man in the city, the one thing she had stopped believing she deserved. A place to belong. A person who saw her fully. A family, chosen and fierce, that would never let her disappear. In the weeks that followed, the house changed in ways that had nothing to do with walls or guards. Hazel stopped arriving at 7 and leaving at dusk. She simply stayed, and no one questioned it, because it had become the most natural thing in the world. The room that had been kept for guests became hers. Her books appeared on the shelves in the study beside Adrian's. Her laughter and Nora's filled hallways that had known only silence and hard footsteps for years. Hazel's mother came to visit, the ailing woman Hazel had supported quietly for so long, and Adrian sent a car for her and treated her with a gentleness that left the old woman speechless. He arranged for her care, quietly and completely, the way he arranged everything, And when Hazel tried to thank him, he only said that her mother was family now, and family was not a thing you thank people for. Hazel wept that night, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming strangeness of being cared for after so many years of doing all the caring herself. The men who worked for Adrian, hard and watchful, grew used to seeing the three of them together, and something in the whole household softened around them. Cormac, who had served the family through its darkest years, was often seen in the garden now, and once or twice, when he thought no one was looking, he did indeed smile at the birds, exactly as Nora had said. Hazel caught him at it one afternoon, and signed the private joke to Nora across the lawn, and the two of them laughed until they could not breathe, and Cormac pretended not to understand, though the corner of his mouth betrayed him. It was not a simple life, and it was not always an easy one, but it was, for the first time in all their separate histories, a shared one, and that made all the difference. The stars brightened overhead, and somewhere in the house a light came on, warm and golden, and the three of them rose at last and walked back toward it together, Nora's hand in Hazel's, Adrian close beside them, the past behind them and everything ahead. And Hazel Brooks, who had spent her whole life certain she was too small to matter, walked into her future certain, for the first time, that she had never been small at all.